Hello and welcome to Man, Woman, God. I'm Nikki, and tonight on the show I have with me our resident health professional, Dr. Rowen D'Souza. Rowen, welcome to the show.
Nice to see you again, Nikki.
Well, I'm so glad that we could actually sit here and have a chat because often you just talk straight to the camera.
Yes.
But Rowen, I wanted to find out a little bit more about what you do because you are a chiropractor, as we all know.
Yes.
And you don't just crack bones.
But we're good at it.
You are good at it, definitely. But Rowen, you do something else which is called NET, which is neuro-emotional technique.
That's right.
Now, I want to know, how did you get involved in this and what does NET involve?
Well, NET, neuro-emotional technique, is a mind-body technique, and basically what it is used for, like a lot of mind-body techniques, is it's used to address the body issues that actually come from stress. Now, we all know that stress affects our body, so we need ways in which to deal with that. You know, a lot of people, very early on in my career, a lot of people came to me, and at university we're taught that when we do the back cracking or the physical therapy that everyone thinks of chiropractors, you know, people would come to that and it would be successful, and you'd have two people sometimes with the same symptom pattern, and you do your physical therapy, and one would really respond well to that, and they would sing your praises and they'd get great relief, and the other person, even though you did the same thing, would have a very different result. They wouldn't settle down, the problem would keep coming back. So clearly there are other factors involved. And this has led not only myself, but a lot of other practitioners in search of ways in which to address these body issues that clearly aren't just based in physical problems. So, you know, we look at things like nutrition, and I've spoken a lot about nutrition, the sugar-free diet, and various other things on this show, and that helps a lot of people as well. But then I think the missing key is emotions, and we call it the triad of health, and it may seem like a unique approach, but I think it's really what, as a practitioner, if you look at yourself honestly, as a practitioner, this is what we have to address. And the triad of health is where we look at structure, which is really important. We need to be physically balanced. Where we look at chemistry, what we eat, the chemicals around us. So we need the right ones and we need to exclude the wrong ones. But also we need to look at emotions and our mental state, our emotional state. Emotions are really important because if you think about it, what an emotion is a response to some perceived stress around us. Now, why I use the word perceived is because, you know, you can have two people sitting in a room and someone comes in and gives them a piece of news, and one will think, oh, that's an opportunity. But the other one will be completely devastated by the same news. So now we perceive things differently, and why we perceive and therefore react to things differently is how we're conditioned. You know, if we experience stress, if we experience rejection, if we experience being made not to feel good enough, that's what we come to believe on a subconscious level. And what NET does is tries and address this. So we take that factor out so we can start to perceive things and therefore react and therefore be healthier as well.
So what is the technique of NET? Like, how do you actually
do
it? Yes.
Well, you know, because you're accessing the subconscious, like most people will come in and they'll be able to give me a very succinct history and a very succinct symptom pattern. They'll be able to talk about the pain, or they'll be talk about their behaviour that they have no control over. And the reason that is because that is being driven not in the conscious, the bit we think with, the bit we make decisions with, but it's being driven in the subconscious. And unfortunately, the subconscious is 90% of our brain. So if there are belief patterns in the subconscious, it's going to be very hard to change just by using the conscious. So what NET does is it accesses the subconscious, and we use what's called muscle testing or kinesiology.
Okay.
Now a lot of people can get a little bit confused about what muscle testing is, and when done properly, when done honestly, what muscle testing is really just a reflex, and it's a measure of our subconscious stress. So if we can induce stress reflexes using muscle testing, what we're sort of doing is we're bypassing the conscious and we're accessing the subconscious. It's not the only way to do it, but it's a way that a lot of practitioners around the world using NET have found to help people with these subconscious patterning. And the reason the subconscious pattern arises, as I said before, is because we have conditioning. You know, we are conditioned, and it's a normal part of life. We need to be conditioned. But if we have some negative conditioning, it can negatively affect our life. So NET, neuroemotional technique, uses muscle testing and it to access the subconscious. And what it does is it uses other reflexes in the body to negate and negate these reflexes, so that what we have is we don't have the same perception. We have a slightly altered perception, so therefore we have a slightly different reaction. Right. And whether or not that reaction leads to physical distress in the body or emotional distress in the body is determined by the subconscious.
Now, Rowen, you talked about two people having different reactions. Now, I really want to explore that a little bit, because it's all about, our past, about how we were brought up, the environment that we were brought up. Do you see a lot of that?
Oh, yes.
Is that always the major issue with people, that it is about their past and what's happened to them in childhood, or,
Here's the thing I think that's important, is that we've all had trauma. We've all had dramas in our life. We've all had things that, aren't quite right. That doesn't necessarily mean that we're all going to be conditioned by those factors, and it doesn't mean that it's going to haunt us for the rest of our lives. Yeah. Healing is possible, and absolutely possible on our own. Yeah. Sometimes the body needs help in healing, though. So it's not only just that there is conditioning, traumas, dramas in our life, but there's also, if there are other health problems, if there are physical restrictions, they add up to the stress. I think the body can only deal with a certain amount of stress. Above that level, things go wrong. We react badly to emotional stress, we react badly to physical stress, we are more likely to react badly to the wrong chemicals in our environment, a poor diet, that sort of thing. So I think, yes, our past do shape us, but it's only when we have other things going on that they add up together and create what we call a neuroemotional complex, and that has negative conditioning. It also tends to have physical misalignments in the spine that we say. It also tends to have chemical imbalances as well, contained within it. And when we
actually, we do have to take a break, but we will come back and talk a little bit more.
Great.
So we'll be back in a few minutes. Welcome back. I'm talking with Dr. Rowen D'Souza. Now, Rowen, when we left for the break, we were talking about how the past affects our now, our future.
Absolutely.
So you were saying something about
what I was saying was
past.
That how we experience this world gives us an idea of where we fit into this world. So if we're made to feel that we're not good enough as a child, and then that's reinforced at school with poor report cards, or school's a bad judge of our true intellect and our true personality, and then that's reinforced again in teenage years, early adulthood. That's how we tend to come to believe ourselves to be, and believe that's where we fit into the world. So therefore we react to this world in a way which shows that we are no good. And if we don't feel good about ourselves, if we don't feel good enough, what happens is we don't feel good enough to be friends, we don't feel good enough to be loved. And that of course affects everything in our life. And it'll start to affect our spiritual life as well. If we don't feel good enough to get the love of our parents, these godlike figures when we're little, you look up at your parents and you think they're gods. And eventually you realise that there's more to this world, and that God is bigger than that. But if we don't feel good enough from our parents, how can we feel good enough from the love of God? How can we feel good enough in our marriage? How can we feel good enough at our work? And that's very much how the past affects our present, and can keep affecting our future as well. NET, neuroemotional technique, looks at breaking that pattern. It's not trying to pep you up and say, well, you are good enough, you are good enough. We know that logically, but it's the subconscious that we have to change. Now remember, emotions are physiological. We're not talking about psychological here. Some people do need counselling. We were talking about that off camera earlier. Counselling is important. Some people do need to talk it out. What we're talking about here is changing the physiology. So it's very much a physiological intervention.
Right.
You know, when we have an emotion, what happens is we release what are called neuropeptides. They're little chemical substances that go to every cell in the body and signal to that cell that we're feeling shame or low self-esteem or fear or anger. So, you know, when we have an emotion, every cell in our body is affected, which then is the mechanism why we can get physical pain from emotional pain. So these neuropeptides, when we perceive something to be, say, shameful, or perceive ourselves to be not good enough, whenever we feel that, we release these substances, and therefore we project that outwards through our physiology. What neuroemotional technique looks at is altering this pattern so that the neuropeptides are different and that we don't then react in the same way. We change our perception to the emotion.
Okay, so you had a story that you were telling me off camera about someone.
Oh, you know, and it's funny because this happened just on Friday, and I hear the story all the time.
Yeah.
You know, people come to me and invariably it's with some sort of chronic problem. In this case, it was an inability to lose weight. And weight is a good one. And, you know, people have heard me talk about weight and ways in dealing with it as well. And weight is a very emotional thing. You know, a lot of people will exercise and diet, and in this particular patient has had surgery, all to no avail. Clearly, there are more powerful factors going on. And you know, sometimes how I explain to people how emotions affect your weight is the weight is like a protective barrier, protecting who we really are to what we perceive as a very cruel world. And this beautiful lady who was in my office on Friday, and you know, was talking about how she couldn't lose weight. She had come to this country as a 16-year-old from Italy. Obviously, she didn't speak English. 16, and you know, when she comes to this country, she obviously doesn't have the education that we would take for granted now. She comes to this country and she's put in an environment where she's put down all the time. She's made to feel inadequate. She's made to feel not good enough. Everything she did was not good enough. And people do that for various reasons to build themselves up. And she lived her life, and she's, you know, that was maybe 60 years ago. She's lived her life like this. She's lived her life not feeling good enough. And I've said to her, we can't blame your body for putting up a barrier between you and the world. But, you know, the sad thing is the true her is not able to come out because the true her was shown to be not good enough. You know, people made her judge, and that's what she has come to believe as well. So she hides her true self under this layer of fat. It's safe there. And, you know, her journey, unfortunately, her journey that we have to guide her with is to open her heart and be herself and have the confidence and have the perception that it's okay to be herself. Now that's reversing 50, 60 years of conditioning, 50, 60 years of being made to feel inferior, 50, 60 years of being made to feel not good. But you know, if we are able to do that, she can have the rest of her life can be full of hope. And at the end, you know, she talked about the saddest thing. She talked about how she loved God, but she didn't know if she could do it anymore. You know, these are people who her conditioning has really taken her to the edge. Her conditioning has really affected every part of her life. And with something like neuroemotional technique, we're able to help these people change how they perceive themselves in this world, change how they perceive stress. And that makes a huge difference to a lot of people's lives.
Well, that's fantastic, Rowen, because, you know, I just have to say, you know, we do affect other people's lives too in what we say and what we do to other people, and that does stop them from coming to know God and from, you know, just reaching out to God, which and it's really good to see that that's, you know, that's your aim, to just open people up to the possibility of God, and that, you know, there's just different things in their worlds that they, you know, that they probably shut out and move away from.
Absolutely.
So, I just want to quickly talk about quick fixes, because you mentioned surgery, and, you know, and I guess that's a quick fix is, you know, is sometimes can be a good thing because it sort of blocks everything else out.
Well, you know, I think we should not judge those who have surgery, lap band surgery in this case, or surgery. You know, it's sometimes necessary, but it's quite often just part of the solution. And I think that's what NET has taught me about health is that we need to look holistically. You know, we talk about the triad of health: physical balance, chemical balance, and emotional balance. If we have that balance, you know, what I like to talk about to people is contentment. It doesn't mean that we walk around happy. Contentment means that we can be happy with we can be content with our lives even when we're sad. We can be content with our lives when we are happy. If we're content, because we have everything in balance, what it means is that we can then seek out a spiritual life. We can seek out good relationships. We can seek out harmony. We can seek out better communities. We can seek out caring for the environment. You know, if we have that contentment, if we have that balance, what we can do is we can actually lead better lives, but also affect the lives of others as well.
True, very
help
true.
them to have better lives, particularly, you know, our kids. That's where a lot of the conditioning starts.
Yep.
You know, our kids, they come and they're that lump of clay that we talk about, and being parents is the biggest responsibility, because what we are charged with is grounding them in what this world is. We can condition them negatively if we judge them harshly, if we treat them harshly, and that's how they'll live the rest of their lives. But as parents and as uncles and aunties, what we have to do is we have to show that these kids it's okay to be themselves. They can make the mistakes in childhood. They can stuff up in childhood, you know, but they've got more opportunities, and that they're loved. And you know, if kids feel this unconditional love of a parent, how much easier is it for that kid to experience the unconditional love of God? You know, it's just so simple.
Well, Rowen, you've put that all just beautifully. I want to thank you so much for coming and joining me.
Always my pleasure.
We'll see you again soon.
Thank you, my darling.
We'll be back after the break. Welcome back to Man, Woman, God. I'm Nikki, and I'm here with my husband, Greg. Greg, welcome.
Thank you, Nikki.
Now, wasn't that a great segment with Dr. Rowen D'Souza?
Fantastic.
Now, Greg, you've actually had, may I say this to everyone out there, that you've actually had some neuro-emotional technique treatment done by Dr. D'Souza.
And it's amazing. It actually blew me away. I couldn't believe
what did they do?
What happens. Well, the bit that stands out for me, and of course I'm just taking a little fragment.
Yeah,
so
sure.
you can't just, I don't want the viewers to think this is what it's all about.
Yes,
it's just one little part of it.
Sure.
But it was the part that amazed me the most, right? Because he's talking about your muscular system holding memories of past experiences, right? Traumas and dramas and all that sort of thing. So for instance, with me, he had me hold my hand up like this, and he put his hand on top of my hand like so, and he'd ask me questions, and I would answer questions. And for example, he might say, "Do you have butter on toast?" And I'd say, "Yes," and I'd resist. And he'd try and push my hand down, but I would resist. And then he'd ask me a whole series of questions, and then he'd ask he'd ask just one other question, and I didn't have the resistance. I couldn't push up against his hand, and as hard as I would try. Every time I would try and answer that question, my body wouldn't let me do it. It's amazing.
That is amazing.
You just don't have control of a response when he asks certain questions, and they're just normal questions. There's no trickery or chicanery around the questions. But
that's great.
It's great. Yeah.
So, Greg, we'll have to get to your emotional issues later on when we get home.
Oh, we need to have an hour show for that.
But we're gonna go to some music now.
Wonderful.
But yes, so if anyone out there wants to know about Rowen, they can just Google Rowen D'Souza chiropractic and
absolutely
get to see what he does. And well, that's all we have for tonight. We're going to finish up with some lovely music from the very talented Thobe, Josie Layton and Tristan Layton. So from me, Nikki, and my husband Greg, we just want to wish you all great health, and may the love and peace of God be with you. Bye-bye.
Your love has ravished my heart and taken me over, taken me over. and all I want is to be with you forever, with you forever. Your love has ravished my heart and taken me over, taken me over. And all I want is to be with you forever, with you forever. Oh, pull me a little closer, take me a little deeper. I wanna know your heart, I wanna know your heart. 'Cause your love is so much sweeter than anything I've tasted. I wanna know your heart, I wanna know your heart. 'Cause your love has ravished my heart and taken me over, it's taken me over. And all I want is to be with you forever, with you forever. So pull me a little closer, take me a little deeper. I wanna know your heart, I wanna know your heart. 'Cause your love is so much sweeter than anything I've tasted. I wanna know your heart, I wanna know your heart. Just pull me a little closer and take me a little deeper. I wanna know your heart, I wanna know your heart. 'Cause your love is so much sweeter than anything I've tasted. I wanna know your heart, I wanna know your heart. Yeah, yeah, know your heart. Anything I've tasted, so sweet, love so sweet. Know your heart. Pull me closer, closer to you. Closer, closer to you. Pull me closer, closer to you. Pull me closer, closer to you. Just pull me closer, closer. I wanna know your heart. Closer, closer to you. I wanna know your heart. Just pull me closer, closer to you, yeah, closer, closer, you more. Just pull me closer, closer, yeah, closer, 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 closer to you. Closer, closer, closer to you. Closer, closer to you.